They called me a fraud in court. But what shattered me wasn't the accusation, it was hearing my own brother say at first. He didn't even hesitate. He stood there calm and certain and said, "My sister Elara Vance forged everything." The room went silent. The judge lowered his eyes. And I realized that for everyone watching, his word carried more weight than my entire life. I wasn't just losing a case. I was being erased by my own blood. That was the moment something inside me broke. And another part, the one that had stayed quiet for years, finally woke up. Because if they wanted to bury Elara Vance, they'd have to dig through the truth first. I used to believe the sea could wash away everything. Grief, guilt, even shame. But some things cling too deep, like the stain of a name that no longer feels like yours. Mornings in Port Harrow always start the same. The smell of salt, the taste of bitter coffee, and the echo of a past that refuses to fade. My house still breathes my father's life wood soaked in oil and seawind. The photo of him in uniform, watching from the wall. His voice lives there too low and steady in my head. Honor is the one thing you don't get to lose. I built my life around those words. I thought I'd protected them. But life has a cruel sense of irony. It doesn't test your honor when you're strong. It tests it when your own blood turns against you. The knot came early before sunrise. 3 sharp raps like gunfire. A man in a dark coat stood on the porch, frost on his sleeves. Elara Vance. Yes. Summons from the State Court of Augusta. The wax seal cracked under my thumb. Plaintiff Julian Vance. Defendant Elara Vance. Charge federal contract fraud. Outside the sea rolled on indifferent. My half-brother was suing me for $18 million of federal funds. I laughed once, quiet and hollow. My father had been dead 10 years, but his shadow still ruled this house. Now the son he'd worshipped most was using that legacy to bury me. I folded the summons, looked toward the waves. If it's a war, you want Julian, I whispered. You'd better pray you've learned how to survive a storm. ChatGPT deny. They say a man can rewrite his will, but not the guilt that made him write it. The first meeting was at Corbin and Finch in Portland. Julian arrived with Camila, our stepmother, both polished and smug. They stood when I entered, but didn't offer a hand. Camila smiled like someone testing poison. Elara, it's been too long. We'd like to end this peacefully. Peace. The word almost made me laugh. You sue me for $18 million and call that peace? Julian leaned forward, smooth as a lecturer. Return the funds you took from father's research account, the Marine Energy Project, and I'll withdraw the case. Do you even know what that money was for? I asked. To build a fake company, he said. Their lawyer slid a document across the table, father's will. Elara lacks the moral and financial integrity to continue. It wasn't his handwriting. I'd held his hand when it trembled too much to sign. After the meeting, Julian whispered, accept it. Your honor was always just a family story. That night, Eleanor Hayes' father's old attorney confirmed the truth. Someone used an angry draft and forged his signature. Only Julian had access. At home, I found father's letter. Don't let honor kill you the way it killed me. I folded it. I wouldn't stay silent. The cruelest betrayal comes from the one who knows where to strike. On the second day of trial, Grant Maddox walked in. My ex-husband now standing with Julian. His badge read Vance Maritime Systems. Mr. Maddox will testify that she falsified contracts. The prosecutor said he's no longer an officer, I replied. He doesn't understand the codes. We have proof, counsel said. Grant met my eyes. You always thought you could protect everyone. Still think so. That night, I opened my old files. Operation Eager Tide, a classified project to harvest ocean current energy for naval bases. Only 5 people had full clearance. Grant was one. He'd stolen my access codes and sold them to Julian. I could expose him, but I'd break. Federal law. Leaving court, a courier handed me an envelope from Norfolk. Inside a photo of Grant shaking Julian's hand the day they sued me. In the corner, the faded seal of the Naval Security Division. I let out a quiet breath. Thank you, Admiral. You're still watching. Silence used to be my armor. Now it felt like a noose tightening around my throat. 2 days after the first hearing, I woke to my phone ringing. Nina Reed's voice was urgent. Turn on your TV. My face filled the national news screen angled harshly beneath the headline. Commander Vance fraud behind the Navy funds. A calm reporter said Alara Vance, former Navy officer, accused of embezzling $18 million. Sources say she's hiding behind military secrecy to avoid prosecution. The coffee in my hand went cold. By noon, a van parked outside. A reporter in red shouted through my gate, asking if I had anything to say. I closed the door. Hours later, the clip aired my silence cut short. The caption beneath reading, "No comment, guilt confirmed." That afternoon, Nina arrived with her laptop. Julian hired Baylight PR. She said, Grant gave them your private files. On screen, Grant appeared in a suit. Alara was brilliant but obsessed with control. She said, without me, no one would remember the project. I turned it off. I never said that. Nina nodded. Then help me prove it. We need something from the Navy. Something only you have. That night, I found an old email from Admiral Cole. Operation Aegir Tide must remain sealed. Your silence is your shield. That shield had become their weapon. Nina discovered the Aegir Tide files were erased the day Grant left the Navy. They'd wiped me from history. Silence isn't honor anymore, she said. It's killing you. I looked at my father's picture. If I stay quiet now, they'll be right. Sometimes survival comes not from faith, but from an envelope that arrives too late and just in time. 3 mornings later, I found a yellow envelope in my mailbox. No return address, only the faded stamp of Norfolk Naval Command. Inside was a brittle document. All expenses under Operation Aegir Tide are classified and undisclosable under any inquiry. Signed, Secretary of the Navy. It could clear me, but if I revealed it, I'd face charges for exposing defense secrets. Nina studied it. That seal hasn't been used since 2000. She said, someone kept this hidden for 25 years. At the bottom was one name, Cole. My old superior presumed dead near Greenland. That night, an unlisted call came. Commander Vance, it's Cole. Keep the letter. When the time comes, you'll know. Then he hung up. Next morning, cameras crowded the courthouse. Julian smirked. Heard you got a letter trying to hide behind the Navy again. No, I said this time you'll see who's really hiding. Before the hearing, Nina handed me a USB. Inside was footage of Julian and Grant leaving a naval site in 2005 carrying a metal case labeled Aegir Tide. For the first time, I wasn't alone. A 52-year-old woman branded a fraud and a 27-year-old reporter seeking justice. 2 strangers standing against a storm called truth. The courtroom smelled of old wood sweat and lies. But I knew truth had its own scent, the salt of the sea after a storm. Augusta was covered in fog that morning. I walked into court wearing a plain gray suit, a small navy pin on my lapel. No one looked twice. Across the aisle, Julian, Camila, and Grant sat in the front row, surrounded by lawyers who charged more per hour than I'd earned in a month of service. As I passed, Grant murmured low enough for only me to hear. Didn't think you'd show up. You never understood me. I said, I've sailed through hurricanes to save men you'd leave behind. You think I'm scared of you? His smile disappeared. Judge Elias Thorne entered, his voice, rough as gravel. Alara Vance charged with defrauding federal contracts under the Defense Budget Act. The prosecution presented spreadsheets too perfect to be real. Where did this data come from? I asked internal files from Vance Maritime provided by Grant Maddox. I stared at him. He looked away. Those records required command clearance. I left the Navy in 2005. Someone used my ID or forged it. You're claiming someone hacked the Navy? The prosecutor sneered. No, someone who once wore the uniform. Nina sitting in the back texted me proof Grant logged in with your ID 4 days after you retired. Your Honor, I requested to submit digital evidence gathered by an independent journalist. You have 24 hours, the judge said. During recess, Julian came close enough to whisper. Still clinging to your Navy honor. No one buys that anymore because you never had any to lose, I said. He smiled thinly. Honor doesn't pay dividends. When court resumed, I said calmly. That information is classified under Navy authority. The room laughed. The judge pounded his gavel. Do you understand the gravity of this? I do. And I know the difference between secrecy and deceit. Later, Nina handed me a paper, a recording Admiral Cole's voice. Commander Vance authorized to proceed under classified directive. He was alive. I wasn't alone anymore. That night, his voice reached me through a private line. Commander Vance, the seal's been lifted. Reveal the data. Open the black box. Why now? Because they've turned your silence into guilt. Let it speak for you. I unlocked the Atlantic box, a titanium drive I'd guarded for 2 decades. Inside was a single file. Eager Tide Meeting 2005. 4 people appeared. My father Julian Grant and me. Father's voice. Transfer the funds to Vance Maritime. It'll dodge inspection. I refused. That's Navy research money. Julian sneered. Honor won't pay the bills. Father slammed the table. For this family's name, you'll stay silent. The recording ended with my voice. I'll stay silent, but not forever. Minutes later, Nina sent me another file. Grant's voice whispered to Julian after Father's death. Elara won't talk. She's too scared of breaking protocol. Her silence keeps us safe. The next morning, I carried the Atlantic box to court. A hard drive. The prosecutor mocked. Playing spy again. Number just returning what you buried 20 years ago. Judge Thorne called a recess. As he passed me, his gaze caught my Navy pin. USS Halley 2001, he said quietly. You pulled me from the water. I did what any commander would. He nodded, eyes bright with something like memory. When court reconvened, his tone was firm but different. The defendant may present her evidence publicly tomorrow. The room erupted. Julian's face drained of color. Grant dropped his head. I placed my hand over the insignia on my chest. For the first time in years, the voice inside me was steady. Commander Vance, back on duty. I never needed them to believe me. I only needed one man to say the word proceed. That morning, the Augusta courthouse overflowed. Cameras flashed like lightning, catching faces that once called me a fraud. I walked past them in a gray suit, the small Navy insignia still pinned to my lapel. Julian leaned toward Grant, whispering something. Their eyes met mine, half contempt, half fear. Today wasn't about defense. It was about closure. Judge Thorne's gravel voice echoed through the chamber. The defendant may present her final evidence. I stepped forward and placed the Atlantic box on the stand. The titanium drive had waited 20 years for this moment. They call me a fraud because I was silent, I began. They think silence means guilt. But in the Navy, silence has another name: duty. The screen flickered. The 2005 meeting appeared. My father, Julian Grant, and me. My voice younger, sharper. I'll stay silent, but not forever. The courtroom froze. Grant shot up shouting. That video's fake. Judge Thorne's gavel slammed. Sit down, Mr. Maddox. I looked straight at him. It's not fake, Grant. You filmed it. He fell silent. A hush settled as I continued. Operation Aegir Tide wasn't a scam. It was a classified energy project meant to save stranded naval crews. The $18 million they call embezzlement was funding that mission. The prosecutor frowned. Do you have proof the Navy authorized it? I unfolded a declassified order. All expenses under Operation Aegir Tide are classified under Federal Authority. Judge Thorne studied the paper, then rose slowly. His voice dropped deep and steady. Commander, you're clear to proceed. No one moved. The words landed heavier than any verdict. For 15 years, I stayed silent to protect my father's name. I said. But truth doesn't need protection. It just needs to be seen. From the back row, Nina lifted her camera. Sunlight broke through the window scattering across the floor. Then her phone rang. Her face went pale. Admiral Cole passed away this morning. But he left a message. 2 words. Proceed, Commander. I felt the air still. The mission was complete. Judge Thorne nodded. This court will recess to verify the evidence. But, Commander Vance, welcome back. I bowed my head. The light above shimmered like the ocean after a storm. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers. Justice doesn't need noise. It only needs a moment bright enough to be seen. The next morning, the courthouse was packed tighter than before. Reporters filled every bench, flashes, cutting through the air like sparks. Veterans in uniform stood quietly in the back rows, men and women I hadn't seen in years. For the first time, no one looked at me with suspicion, only with the heavy curiosity of people about to watch truth burn through lies. The prosecutor rose first, his voice tight. Your Honor, the FBI has verified new recordings extracted from the Atlantic box. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered. Julian's voice filled the room smooth and cold. Transfer $12 million to Grant's account. Call it technical expenses. Grant's voice followed lower, hesitant. And what about Aegir Tide? Julian, delete it. Elara won't speak. She's chained by her honor. Then my father's voice, weak, breaking under guilt. If Elara's discovered, we lose everything. Keep it quiet. The faint sound of waves bled into the background. That same rhythm I'd heard outside my childhood window. A hush swept through the courtroom as if the sea itself had arrived to testify. Judge Thorne slammed the gavel once. The evidence is authenticated. This court hereby dismisses all charges against the defendant, Commander Elara Vance. The word struck the room like thunder. Gasps, murmurs, cameras clicked wildly. Then the sound of heavy boots echoed. Federal agents entered from the side door. Julian Vance, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and perjury. Grant Maddox for aiding and abetting. Julian's face drained of color. Camila stumbled back, clutching her handbag like a shield. No, this can't be, she whispered. Julian turned toward me, voice shaking. You ruined us. No, I said quietly. You ruined yourself. I just turned the lights back on. As the agents led them away, Grant twisted around, desperation cracking through his composure. He forced me. Elara, he threatened to kill you if you didn't confess. I looked him in the eye, calm as the tide. No one's forcing anyone anymore, Grant. The sea cleans up its own mess. Judge Thorne rose, eyes steady on me. Commander Vance, you've carried silence longer than anyone should. The court recognizes your service and your truth. I nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. The room erupted outside those words, reporters shouting, microphones thrust forward. Commander Vance, one called out. What would you say to the public now that you're free? I paused at the courthouse steps. The wind from the KBC River swept my hair back. Salt in the air, sunlight spilling over the marble columns. Yes, I said. Truth needs no defense. For a long moment, the noise faded. The crowd blurred into a wave of sound: cheers, shouts, applause, but all I heard was the rhythm of the river, steady and calm. For 20 years I had carried my silence like a wound. Now it beat in time with the world again, slow, certain, alive. I used to fear silence. Now I know within it lives freedom. I returned to the old wooden house in Port Harrow, the one that had weathered more storms than I ever could. The sea was calm again, rolling in soft, deliberate breaths, like an old friend finally at peace. I made coffee and opened the window. The light poured in golden and kind, catching the edge of my father's photograph. For years that picture had haunted me, the stern eyes, the jaw set in duty. But standing there, I felt no anger left to give him. He had taught me about honor. I had simply taught the world that honor is not the same as silence. By late afternoon, Nina arrived with the sound of the sea still on her jacket. She handed me a printed draft, the title in bold, The Commander They Call the Fraud. I read it slowly, the way one reads something both personal and distant. At the end, she'd written, "Justice was served." I crossed out the line and wrote beneath it, "Justice didn't need to be served. It was waiting all along." Nina smiled, her eyes glinting in the fading light. "You're still a commander, aren't you?" "No," I said softly. "I'm just someone who used to be called one." She hugged me before leaving, her footsteps fading down the wooden steps until only the ocean remained. I stepped onto the balcony. The air was sharp with salt, the kind that stings and heals at the same time. The waves shimmered under the silver moon, each one carrying away the weight of years that had once kept me anchored to shame. For a moment, I just listened to the wind brushing the cliffs, to the creak of the old railing, to the hush that filled everything. Then I spoke barely above a whisper. "That's the sound of silence when justice breathes." The moonlight slipped through the open window, landing on the small navy insignia resting on the table. Its metal glowed faintly, a quiet pulse of memory. I reached out and touched it once, then let my hand fall away. Outside, the tide was retreating slow and steady. Not an ending, just the sea remembering how to begin.